What's going on, everyone? Today I'm gonna talk about a really common mistakes and gotchas that even advanced Node.js or JavaScript developer always made. The first example here, we have a literal object in JavaScript, and this object is named person. So we got a name, address, and there's a report function that just return that person address. In this report function, basically I have a arrow function that return this.names, and then I just concatenate the address at the end of it. If you run this, it's actually show you that this.name is actually undefined, the same as this.address as well. Well, the reason for this is that, first of all, literal object in JavaScript doesn't introduce scope. However, arrow function in JavaScript is actually got inherit scope from parent scope. This is also called a lexical scope, but because the literal object in JavaScript doesn't introduce scope, then the arrow function in this person object gonna inherit the global scope, which encapsulate this person object, and that's why you see undefined here, because there's no name or address properties in the global objects in Node.js. I can do a console log here for you to see. If you run this again, you can see this, all of these objects here, actually the global object in Node.js, and if you run this code on client, you can see this is going to be a window object. I hope that's clear for you, and the easiest way to fix this is actually just use a normal function. A normal function in JavaScript, and now when you run it, it's actually output you the right variables or the right response. So just to recap, this problem only arises when you try to use arrow functions in a object literal in JavaScript. So don't use that. Alright, moving on to the second example. So this second example looks similar to the first one, except we have a person functional constructor in JavaScript. So in this person function, we have a this.name and this.address. This is going to be assigned to the name address given when you create a new person object. And as you can see here, the report function now is declared as person.prototype.report, and this also an arrow function that return exactly the same response as in the first example. So this looks really simple, and on line 8 I just declare a person object named Kevin, and in this I just give Kevin objects with name and address, same as the first example. And when I do a console log, Kevin.report is actually showing me undefined for this.name and this.address. Well, this is quite weird, right? But actually, if you look at this again, in this arrow function here, when you declare a report method as an arrow function, that this here is actually the global scope, is not actually the person scope anymore. So one way to fix this is to move all of these report functions inside a functional person, a functional constructor. Now this gonna work fine. As you can see, it gives you a correct response. So why is this? This is because when you use a functional constructor with new, is actually create an empty objects first, and then it's gonna bind this keyword with the any instance created by that function constructor. So because of that, these gonna always point to any person instance. And for this arrow function here, because it's gonna inherit the scope from the parent, the scope now is gonna be this person instance. That's why this dot name is gonna be Kevin, and this dot address gonna be 1 Campbell Avenue, as you can see. So to sum up, when you use a functional constructor with new keyword, it's actually create a empty object, and then it's gonna add the properties in it, and then it's gonna bind this keyword to any instance of that functional constructor created. And it's also introduced scope as well. That's why when arrow function is created, the scope is inherit is actually the scope of the person instance. Now you may ask, what if I use a class like in this example? So now if you look at this, it looks exactly the same as second example. Instead I use a class instead of function. So this still doesn't work. As you can see, the same issues arise here. So here, so all we have to do now, we just need to move this report inside this class person, and everything gonna work. Yes, so now things works perfectly. That's all for today. If you like this content, please give me a like on this video and subscribe to my channel. Cheers guys.